A desperate voice calls out from the void, begging Hirakawa for just one chance. The mysterious girl continues her intense plea, insisting that a single opportunity is all she needs. Hirakawa Asahi formally introduces himself as the protagonist of this highly unusual story. He reflects on his completely average life, ordinary grades, and absolute lack of a romantic partner. His ordinary reality shatters that morning while watching a television broadcast about a newly opened hot spring in Atami. On the screen, a reporter comments on the natural beauty while a sudden clattering sound disrupts the entire broadcast. Hirakawa stammers in pure shock as the reporter casually makes highly inappropriate comments about her own physique on national television. Questioning his own sanity, he is quickly snapped back to reality by his mother urging him to finish breakfast before he is late. Walking to school, he assumes the bizarre television program will inevitably face intense public backlash and complaints. A glaring public poster suddenly catches his eye, distinctly warning citizens to beware of female assailants. He stops dead in his tracks, thoroughly confused by the seemingly reversed gender roles displayed on the warning sign. His confusion deepens as a news ticker announces the first male prime minister and a massive political push for men's social advancement. Bewildered and disoriented, he desperately tries to comprehend the massive societal shift happening all around him. Spotting a men-only train carriage, he realizes every single thing since he woke up has been fundamentally altered. Though the world looks visually identical to yesterday, he deduces that the social standing and treatment of men and women have completely flipped. Squeezed into the packed train carriage, he actively struggles against the overwhelming crowd of morning commuters. He watches the suffocating conditions of the general carriages, feeling completely overwhelmed by the sheer density of passengers. Suddenly, a startling sensation interrupts his thoughts and makes him jump in sheer alarm. A strange hand rubs against him, forcing him to realize he is the active victim of a female assailant. Remembering the warning poster, he panics as incredibly soft hands boldly reach for his belt in a brazen attempt to undress him. Frozen in shock, he helplessly endures the aggressive and unwanted advances within the tightly confined space. Gathering his courage, he loudly exposes the culprit, leaving the predatory woman momentarily stunned and silent. The surrounding crowd instantly turns on the woman, expressing deep disgust while urging her to quietly exit the train at the next station. Desperate to escape the harsh public judgment, the exposed assailant frantically scrambles to flee the scene. He clenches his fists in sheer frustration, furious that the culprit managed to slip away after he finally caught her in the act. Still reeling from the unbelievable encounter, he is approached by a female classmate who mistakenly calls him Hiramama while checking on his well-being. He awkwardly corrects her about his real name, prompting a highly flustered apology from the embarrassed girl. She nervously tries to laugh off the mistake, claiming she genuinely thought she had memorized all the boys in their class. He recognizes her as Sotogahama, a popular and extroverted classmate who normally exists in a completely different social tier from him. Realizing she is surprisingly kind and friendly, he immediately sheds his previous assumption that she was unapproachable and scary. Sotogahama suddenly checks the time in a panic, loudly alerting him that they are running incredibly late for school. Wasting absolutely no time, she boldly commands him to jump onto the back of her bicycle. Clinging to her as they speed away toward the campus, a profound realization completely washes over him. He stares ahead into the wind, fully accepting that he has somehow been thrust into a completely ridiculous world. Enduring the fierce bicycle ride, he is momentarily distracted by the surprisingly plain sight of Sotogahama's undergarments. They finally arrive at the school grounds, rushing desperately to make it inside the building before the bell rings. The loud school bell suddenly chimes across the campus, officially signaling the start of morning classes. He briefly reflects on how normal and completely predictable his classroom dynamics used to be just yesterday. Stepping through the doors, he is instantly greeted by a dramatically altered and chaotic classroom atmosphere. Surveying his strange new classmates, he officially confirms his terrifying suspicion that the societal dominance of men and women has entirely reversed. A group of girls chats excitedly about a recent social meetup with a neighboring high school, telling Gahama she missed out on a fantastic time. Sotogahama visibly regrets missing the fun, lamenting that she should never have scheduled a shift for her part-time job. Asahi overhears their boisterous conversation about athletic guys, silently wishing they would not discuss such things so loudly. He quietly notes to himself that she seems highly interested in athletic physiques. His classmate, Fujisaki Haruto, whispers that anyone would be curious about such loud conversations, though the intense volume is a bit much. Haruto gently asks if Asahi is uncomfortable with people being so incredibly open about their social interests. Asahi suddenly realizes that in this flipped reality, men are the ones constantly being objectified and made uncomfortable. Trying not to look suspicious, Asahi awkwardly agrees that having absolutely no tact is a terrible trait. The girls continue pestering Gahama to join them next time, wondering how she ever finds the time to meet new people. Gahama confidently brags about her busy social life, claiming she met her 12th person just last week. Astonished by her sheer numbers, Haruto silently remarks that she is interacting with way too many people. Turning his attention back, Haruto notices Asahi zoning out and points out his strange behavior during class. Panicking that he might lose his friends if he fails to adapt to this world, Asahi freezes when Haruto asks if something happened. With a loud clatter, Asahi abruptly confesses that he encountered an aggressive female assailant on the train that morning. Haruto eagerly demands to know if the culprit was caught, but Asahi regretfully admits she managed to escape. Asahi is thoroughly taken aback by how intensely shocked and visibly trembling Haruto becomes upon hearing the news. Haruto frantically insists they must report the incident to a teacher immediately to prevent anyone else from falling victim. Though Asahi tries to brush it off as a minor event, Haruto expresses deep, genuine concern for his safety. Reluctantly yielding to the intense pressure, Asahi nervously approaches the staff room door. He awkwardly reports the encounter to a teacher, who reacts with an expression of absolute, unbridled horror. Feeling completely humiliated, Asahi endures a relentless bombardment of highly uncomfortable questions. Leaving the staff room as the sun begins to set, he quietly notes how incredibly late it has gotten. A sudden, startled gasp echoing from a nearby classroom makes him freeze instantly in his tracks. He cautiously approaches the doorway, peering inside to investigate the source of the mysterious sound. Hiding in the shadows, he overhears someone whispering passionately about a highly intense and overwhelming encounter. The trembling voice struggles to hold back deep emotion, swept up in a whirlwind of confusing feelings. Exhausted and breathless, the hidden figure sighs heavily as the overwhelming tension finally breaks. Asahi stands completely paralyzed by the doorway, utterly bewildered by the bizarre scene unfolding before him. The figure suddenly jolts upward in pure surprise, revealing herself to be Soto Gahama as she nervously stammers his name. They lock eyes in a tense, silent moment of sheer, heart-stopping panic. An ear-piercing shriek suddenly shatters the absolute silence of the empty school building. Driven by pure embarrassment, she bolts wildly out of the classroom and flees down the hallway. Heart pounding wildly in his chest, Asahi stares blankly at the exact spot she was occupying and realizes it is his own desk. Trembling with sheer confusion, he desperately wonders why Soto Gahama was acting so incredibly strangely around his personal belongings. Suddenly, her voice eerily echoes through the void, urgently calling out his name. The voice aggressively insists that she cannot wait a single second longer for him. A sudden, violent crash jolts him awake, snapping him out of his vivid daze as his heart races out of control. Haruto looks down at him with deep concern, gently asking if he is all right after falling asleep. The surrounding girls playfully tease him for dozing off, making him realize the entire bizarre encounter was merely a vivid dream. Thoroughly disoriented by the sudden shift back to reality, he is abruptly interrupted by Soto Gahama calling his name in the waking world. Someone urgently points out that Hirakawa is bleeding heavily from his sudden fall. The teacher instructs him to visit the infirmary immediately while asking for the designated health committee member. Raising her hand nervously, Soto Gahama timidly announces that she holds the health committee position. Hirakawa stares at her in absolute shock, completely taken aback by this unexpected coincidence. Gently checking if he can stand, she playfully remarks that they seem completely bound by some strange connection. Excusing themselves from the chaotic classroom, the two walk side by side into the quiet infirmary. Peeking around the empty room, she realizes the nurse is missing and wonders if she should hunt for a band-aid herself. Turning back to him, she expresses genuine concern over how terrible he must feel after collapsing so abruptly. Sweating profusely, Hirakawa frantically tells himself he can never admit his collapse was triggered by a wild dream about her. Triumphantly rummaging through the medical supplies, she finds a fresh band-aid and prepares to patch him up. As she carefully applies the bandage, he sincerely thanks her for coming to his rescue. He expresses deep gratitude, thanking her for helping him both on the crowded train yesterday and in the infirmary today. She pauses in surprise, looking slightly puzzled before awkwardly acknowledging his heartfelt appreciation. Fidgeting nervously with her hands, she suddenly calls his name with a burning question on her mind. Fixing him with a piercing stare, she timidly demands to know exactly how long he was watching her alone in the classroom. Waving his hands in sheer panic, Hirakawa frantically lies that he did not see absolutely anything. Blushing fiercely, he defensively stammers that he never intended to peek at her private moment. Jolting slightly, she listens closely as he awkwardly claims he only returned to the empty room to retrieve his forgotten bag. Bursting into tears, she bows her head and apologizes profusely for losing control of her emotions at his desk. Sitting up abruptly, she angrily commands him to raise his head, fiercely blaming him for the entire embarrassing incident. When he questions her logic, she blushes heavily and explains that his tight grip on her waist during the bike ride completely overwhelmed her. He stares in utter disbelief, wondering how a simple safety measure could be his fault, while she insists it sent her mind reeling. Remembering her classroom boasts, he voices his surprise that she would act out alone since she seemed so incredibly experienced with relationships. Overcome with deep shame, she hesitates anxiously before preparing to reveal her most closely guarded secret. Trembling slightly, she confesses with a heavy blush that she is actually completely inexperienced with romance. Fully bracing for his disgust, she is absolutely stunned when he admits her innocence is not a deal-breaker at all. Thoroughly confused by her revelation, he questions her earlier brag about having 12 past romantic partners. Fidgeting nervously under his gaze, she admits she was simply showing off to maintain her powerful social image. He gently suggests there was no need to fabricate her relationship history, prompting her to argue fiercely that he simply does not understand. She desperately explains that her popular friends are seasoned socialites, and discovering her innocence would get her instantly exiled from the group. When he insensitively asks why she doesn't just casually date someone to fix it, he immediately regrets his total lack of tact. Trembling with embarrassment, she tearfully reveals that despite her bold exterior, she is actually an incredibly shy person at heart. Misinterpreting his silent shock, she violently accuses him of secretly mocking her and inventing cruel nicknames in his head. Lunging forward with a sudden burst of desperate energy, she frantically grabs him by the shoulders. With tears streaming down her face, she begs him intensely for just one single chance to experience romance. Hirakua reflects wildly on this bizarre chain of events, realizing the absurd consequences of being thrust into this upside-down reality. Caught completely off guard by her desperate plea, he realizes he is about to lose his peaceful, ordinary life forever. Hirakua nervously asks if she is truly okay with this, double-checking to ensure she isn't lying. She instantly gets defensive, insisting she wouldn't do something like that while asking if he thinks this is some sort of trap. He quickly apologizes for doubting her, gently reminding her that she was the one who invited him in the first place. He also points out their perfect isolation, noting that the infirmary happens to be completely empty. With his heart pounding wildly in his chest, he boldly declares that he won't hold back anymore. He marvels at this incredible opportunity, reflecting on how society's traditional values regarding boys and girls have completely reversed. The two of them stand silently in the quiet room, the overwhelming tension between them growing thicker by the second. Staring closely at her, he silently notes how incredibly prominent her physical features truly are. Eager to break the ice, he boldly asks if she would be willing to remove her outer layers. She violently recoils from him, shouting a desperate refusal at his sudden and highly direct request. She tearfully admits that the situation is just too embarrassing, unable to bear the thought of him seeing her so vulnerable. He expresses complete disbelief at her sudden hesitation, wondering why she is backing out after they already made it this far. A sudden burst of inspiration strikes him as he realizes her prominent figure is standing right in front of him. Taking the bold initiative, he quickly sheds his own outer shirt to make her feel much more comfortable and equal. He gently prompts Sotogahama, asking if she is finally going to remove her jacket as well. She hesitates nervously, realizing it wouldn't be entirely fair if she didn't match his resolve to overcome her deep shyness. He watches with intense anticipation as she finally gathers her courage and begins to comply with his request. She struggles awkwardly with her clothing, her face flushing bright red with intense hesitation. He feels like he is living in a vivid dream, realizing she is close enough to touch if he just reaches out his hand. She desperately begs him not to laugh, emphasizing that she is completely serious about her hidden insecurities. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of sheer panic, she abruptly declares that she absolutely cannot go through with it. She apologizes profusely and suggests they try another time, leaving him stunned since they hadn't even done anything yet. Without waiting for a single word in response, she turns and frantically sprints back toward their classroom. He stands completely frozen in the empty infirmary, utterly bewildered about what exactly went wrong during their moment. Later, a glaring street advertisement for the Tuu Beauty Clinic proudly promotes expert doctors highly skilled in physical adjustments. She groans in sheer frustration, feeling utterly mocked by the perfectly timed and highly specific advertisement. Reflecting heavily on Hirakawa's earlier reaction, she becomes absolutely convinced that he was completely turned off by her appearance. She bitterly laments that a major reason for her total lack of experience is the deep insecurity she harbors about her prominent physique. She aggressively complains that her proportions ruin her fashion choices, making it practically fatal for a girl to have an unflattering figure. She readily acknowledges that petite girls have their own unique struggles, like finding properly fitting clothes. She lets out a heavy sigh, painfully remembering the countless awful experiences she has endured simply because of her appearance. The clinic advertisement cheerily boasts great station access and a highly affordable price tag of 300,000 yen. She balks dramatically at the astronomical price, realizing it would take months of pouring all her part-time job earnings into it. Letting out a heavy, deeply defeated sigh, she desperately tries to process her overwhelming and frustrating situation. She thoroughly resigns herself to her current fate, concluding that she has absolutely no choice but to work incredibly hard at her part-time job. A sudden, jarring realization violently jolts her from her gloomy and self-deprecating thoughts. She frantically checks the current time, her heart instantly leaping into her throat out of pure shock. Realizing it is almost 5 in the evening, she deeply panics over having fallen asleep while worrying about her problems. Her friend Riria casually asks if she has the day off, but she screams that she has to make a mad dash to work. Riria kindly offers her a ride, but she declines, reminding her friend that she strictly needs her own bicycle for her food delivery job. Struggling fiercely to zip up her work uniform, she grunts in heavy frustration at how incredibly tight it feels. She calls out her rapid departure as the bicycle bell chimes, prompting Riria to cheerfully tell her to be careful out there. Pedaling rapidly down the street, she admits the cycling wear is comfortable but deeply hates how much it makes her physique stand out. She grumbles constantly about the daily hassle of getting dressed, insisting there is absolutely nothing good about her prominent figure. She sighs heavily over the harsh fact that prioritizing functionality means boys always end up seeing her in completely plain attire. Pushing through her lingering frustration, she focuses her energy and pedals even harder down the quiet suburban road. Trying her best to lift her own spirits, she firmly decides to look for some cuter clothes on her way back home. She stares dead ahead with completely renewed determination, silently vowing that her next attempt will definitely be a major success. Gripping the handlebars tightly, she completely dedicates her next attempt to sharing a deeply meaningful moment with Hirakawa. Questioning his own actions, Hirakawa wonders what exactly went wrong during their deeply confusing interaction. He heavily reflects on how surprisingly direct he was and how she completely panicked and fled the room. Pacing anxiously, he worries that he was far too pushy and stared at her prominent figure for way too long. The teacher suddenly snaps him out of his intense daydream, loudly scolding him for spacing out in the middle of class. Realizing his internal debate is entirely useless, he decides he cannot solve this mystery just by overthinking it. He firmly acknowledges that it would be incredibly helpful if he could simply gather the courage to ask her directly. Later that afternoon, the school bell finally rings as classmates cheerfully bid each other farewell for the day. Stepping outside, he sighs heavily as a sudden downpour perfectly mirrors his gloomy and highly confused state of mind. He abruptly bumps into Sotogahama at the entrance, groaning in pure frustration over forgetting to bring his umbrella. Startled by his sudden presence, she nervously asks about his umbrella while he awkwardly admits his total lack of preparation. Laughing awkwardly about the unpredictable weather, he suddenly realizes this unexpected rainstorm might be a perfect opportunity to talk. Gathering every ounce of his courage, he boldly offers to share an umbrella, catching her completely off guard. Misinterpreting her sudden silence, he quickly apologizes and starts to retreat under the assumption she wants nothing to do with him. She violently waves her hands in pure panic, desperately clarifying that she is just acting strange and truly wants his company. She shyly admits her intense hesitation, genuinely worried that she might be heavily bothering him by walking together. He freezes in sheer disbelief, utterly stunned by her incredibly sweet and thoroughly considerate response. Walking side by side beneath the tiny umbrella, a heavy and painfully awkward silence quickly settles between them. He desperately tries to lift his own spirits, reminding himself how incredibly rare it is to share an umbrella with a female classmate. Breaking the heavy tension, she suddenly speaks up and nervously calls out his name. Bowing her head slightly, she offers a profound and frantic apology for her highly erratic behavior the previous day. He quickly waves off her apology with a gentle smile, assuring her that he completely understands she must have had her personal reasons. Taking a share of the heavy blame, he awkwardly admits that his own complete lack of tact contributed to the confusing situation. Looking up at him with highly hopeful eyes, she quietly asks if he can spare a little bit of time right now. He cautiously confirms his availability, deeply curious about what could possibly be troubling her so much. Shivering slightly in the damp cold, she politely suggests they find a private place to shelter from the heavy rain and talk properly. Scanning the bustling street, she points directly toward a brightly lit karaoke building nearby to serve as their refuge. Approaching the front desk, they quietly request a private room to fully escape the miserable weather outside. The heavy door clicks shut behind them, instantly enveloping them in a highly private and quiet atmosphere. Eager to be helpful, she quickly volunteers to visit the drink bar and cheerfully takes his soda order. Sitting completely alone in the small booth, he realizes with a wildly pounding heart that this is his first time going to karaoke with a girl. Feeling slightly guilty for making her do the work, he decides to order some warm French fries to share when she returns. She returns to the room with a bright smile, carefully handing him a tall glass of bright green melon soda. Gratefully accepting the beverage, he gently prompts her to reveal the important topic she wanted to discuss. Staring down at the table, she nervously explains that she needs to clarify the exact reason for her sudden escape yesterday. He panics internally as her mood noticeably plummets, realizing she is incredibly insecure about her prominent physical appearance. Desperately trying to salvage the situation, he frantically waves his hands and heavily insists he never meant to criticize her. Blushing furiously, he averts his eyes and awkwardly confesses that he actually really appreciates her unique figure. She reveals her intense internal debate, shocking him by mentioning her deep consideration of an expensive cosmetic adjustment. As she thoroughly explains the surgery to alter her figure, he scoffs in pure disbelief and loudly declares that changing her perfect appearance would be a massive waste. Stunned by his incredibly blunt defense, she offers a deeply heartfelt thank you, leaving him completely bewildered that he is being praised merely for appreciating her natural physique. Smiling warmly, Hirakawa assures Sotogahama that he is glad to help her find courage, realizing she is far more troubled by her insecurities than he expected. Feeling accomplished for doing a good deed, he suggests they finally sing a song since they are already settled in the karaoke room. Cutting him off, she boldly asks for one more chance to share a highly meaningful moment together. Stunned by her sudden and incredibly direct request, he completely freezes in utter disbelief. Reeling from the shock, he desperately stammers that he never came here with any ulterior motives. Watching her tremble intensely, he realizes that Sotogahama is incredibly nervous because she is also experiencing this massive milestone for the first time. Gathering his courage, he proudly accepts her invitation while bashfully admitting that it is his first time as well. Overjoyed by his wholehearted acceptance, she squeals in pure delight and bursts into tears of profound relief. The heavy atmosphere suddenly shifts as they both awkwardly hesitate, completely unsure of how to proceed. Ignoring his frantic worries about hidden cameras, she confidently assures him that their specific corner is a total blind spot. Taking the absolute lead, she vows to do her very best and firmly tells him to leave everything in her hands. Blushing furiously as she prepares herself, she shyly begs him not to stare too intensely at her. Marveling at her incredibly impressive figure, he gently reassures her that she looks absolutely beautiful. Pouting playfully, she calls him a meanie while teasingly challenging him to show her exactly how much he cares. The door violently swings open as a cheerful staff member suddenly barges in to deliver their plate of hot French fries. Scrambling wildly in sheer panic, they desperately try to compose themselves under the incredibly awkward gaze of the stunned employee. Standing dejectedly outside the karaoke building, he sighs heavily and laments that their highly anticipated moment was completely ruined once again. Kicking the wet pavement, he angrily blames himself for hesitating too long and deeply fears that Sotogahama is finally disappointed in him. To his total surprise, she flashes a bright smile and eagerly promises to continue their highly special moment some other time. Fired up by her incredible determination, he enthusiastically agrees and fiercely vows to go home and research exactly how to make their next attempt absolutely perfect.